Good evening and welcome to Epilepsy Today. Hey, and Margo, we got somebody special with us, Brian Thompson. And Brian has specifically come here today to talk to us a little bit about biofeedback. Biofeedback has been with the epilepsy community in one way or another for quite a few years.
Yeah, over 40 years.
So it's 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
40 years. So exactly what are we talking about when we're talking about biofeedback, Brian?
Mm-hmm. Well, you're using the term biofeedback, which is covering a lot of different modalities used for training the body.
Okay.
So you can monitor hand temperature or sweat gland activity. And the thing to understand, the underlying theme is that once you are able to see these things consciously, well, usually they're unconscious, you can start to train them.
Okay.
So somebody with sweaty hands with the right equipment can see fine changes in their sweat glands, and they can learn to train that so their hands are less sweaty.
Okay.
And then one of my favorite examples is Swami Rama from India. He, just by sitting and watching the colors of his hand, he could change one side of his hand and make it red, and the other side blue, which was a blood flow thing.
Really?
But that took him 13 years.
I'm watching his hand.
Yeah. So we're not going to do that. But with two thermistors, you can monitor temperature within 1/10 of a degree, say, and it can update itself every second. And college students can sit and learn in 2 weeks to do the same thing. So that instrumentation speeds up the learning process because you have a clear signal of what you're working with.
Right, right.
Okay, so that's biofeedback, heart rate variability, hand temperature, muscle tension. But then if you focus just on brain waves and training brain waves, then it's called neurofeedback.
Oh, okay.
So that's a specific category of biofeedback.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which would actually be what we would be interested in trying to control seizures with that,
Yeah,
correct?
curiously, now, there's so many surveys talking about stress and epilepsy, and everybody's, most people, I get stressed, I tend to have more seizures. So let's take all these modalities of biofeedback and train people to relax, to stay on the parasympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system.
Okay.
Right there, you've gained ground in controlling seizures.
Okay.
Because the person's staying in that mode. Now, it might not work for all types of epilepsy, but curiously, a very simple modality, again, sweat gland activity. They've shown that a person who can will their sweat glands to fire on their hands and increase activity, it somehow goes along with the change in their cortical activity. And that alone will decrease seizure frequency. So that's been around, and that's not. There's a nice study by Tan, T-A-N, and he was talking about a 50% improvement. It might be that 50% of people had at least a 50% reduction in their seizure activity.
That's pretty significant. That's better than you get with medications.
Well, and I'm just saying these are things that are here, and if we just call attention to them and put the spotlight on them, people can look on the internet, Google neurofeedback epilepsy, and there's International Society of Neurofeedback and Research, ISNR, and just
ISNR. Okay.
And type that into the Google search, and then they'll have categories. You can see some studies on epilepsy. And so, but you mentioned 40 years ago, or asked how long, and I guess it's interesting to me that this happened 40 years ago, and we're not hearing about it now. I asked Margo earlier, having epilepsy yourself, had you heard about neurofeedback before I mentioned it?
And I had.
And you hadn't. So we'll jump back in time now, and Barry Sturman, PhD psychologist at UCLA, was doing some research with cats, and he trained them just feeding them milk in an operant conditioning setting. Here's your reward. And the cats, they actually had electrodes on the cat brain, cat cortex.
Okay.
And the sensory motor rhythm is more pronounced when, or occurs when, a cat is perfectly still and maybe about to pounce on a mouse.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fully awake and alert, but it's very still.
Mm-hmm.
So that sensory motor rhythm was just something that Barry Sturman decided he wanted to have more of in the cats. And the cats did increase their sensory motor rhythm activity because they were getting milk when it happened.
Okay.
The
They were
cats,
getting a reward.
yeah,
Yeah.
they don't know what their brainwaves are, but here comes more milk. So somehow their internal world was doing something and making more sensory motor rhythm. Okay, then NASA, this is all coincidental, serendipitous, but NASA comes to Barry Sturman and says, we're having a problem with rocket fuel causing seizures. Rocket fuel vapors were causing seizures, and they wanted to know how much can we have in the air around our workers before we really have to start to work.
Okay.
So Barry Sturman gets a hold of that problem, and he starts exposing cats to the rocket fuel. But curiously, half of the cats could tolerate maybe 3 times the exposure before they reached their threshold and had seizures.
Mm-hmm.
So a lab assistant's seeing this, and he goes, wait a minute, those were the cats that we trained to up their sensory motor rhythm.
Mm.
So, also coincidentally, Barry Sturman's receptionist had epilepsy.
Okay.
So, without putting electrodes on her cortex directly, he used scalp electrodes, but he started training her sensory motor rhythm up. And she was given a computer screen, and maybe the standard graphics might be just a bar and make this go up. And as that would burst up, or there would be a sound that went along with the burst of sensory motor rhythm activity, she would be conscious of it and could do something inside her world to reinforce that.
Mm-hmm.
Epilepsy, seizures went away, medication went away, and that was 40 years ago.
Wow.
Just that one case alone, you would think neurologists would be, let's explore this a little bit more. People would be interested in it. And so that was with simple kinds of equipment and training. Of course, computer technology and understanding of operant conditioning, brainwave training's come a long way. And I had the opportunity at the most recent ISNR conference here in September to interview John Walker.
Okay.
And he's by profession, he spent time with neurosurgeons and helping them locate epilepsy foci, seizure foci,
Okay.
and then they would do the surgery, and these were people that were resistant to medication, 3-4 medications, and failed, and then they were candidates for surgery, and he's familiar with all of that work. But as time went on and he got more interested in quantitative EEG, which is using computer analysis to take a closer look at the patterns of an EEG. So neurofeedback people tell me, well, we can take EEG, and let's say there's 100% of information there. Looking at it with the naked eye, an epileptologist can get 80% of the information. The computer's going to give you the other 20% of useful information. So then John Walker, just working and with his understanding, the latest is that he's trained 150 people with neurofeedback, and 90% of them have gained control of their seizures.
Nice.
So that's 90%. Now, 50% of that 90% are off their medication.
Wow.
And he really feels
That's quite an
strongly,
accomplishment.
that that percentage could be higher, but just simply because people are afraid to leave the medication out of the picture, understandably, that percentage is at 50%. So, so that's John Walker, and maybe people could Google neurofeedback, epilepsy, and Jonathan Walker.
Okay, if they wanted to find out more information about this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Brian, I have a question for you, because I'm not sure if we really discussed it, but what's your expertise? I mean, I know you're just not doing all of this research for fun.
Well,
A little bit?
I guess the research is reading and having a chance to talk to people, but my undergraduate degree is in mechanical engineering. And
Oh, okay.
and actually, my senior year, some guys were working with EEG equipment and the concept of controlling your brain waves. Because in the 60s, Joe Kamaya was training people to increase their alpha waves. And indeed, that is a relaxation mode. All the animal kingdom has alpha waves at the back of their head. That's 10 hertz when they close their eyes. Any animal, us, close our eyes, alpha waves. And that's associated with a calm and accepting state. So that was on the scene, and then the equipment wasn't so good, and it fell out of favor, and maybe it threw people off for a long time, and then in the last 10, 15 years, it's really been coming on in a different and more sophisticated way. So then I did go to medical school, and I have an MD, and then I did an extra 4th year of medical school in the Shriners Burns Institute using hypnosis for pain control.
Oh, wow.
And then I started seeing things in a little bit different way. I worked in a psychobiology lab. I worked with biofeedback for migraine headaches in family practice department here with Robert Smith, and that was a few years. And then I've done some consulting work with some companies in electrodiagnostics.
Well, that's cool. I just asked because I appreciate all the information that you've
Yeah.
really given to us, and
Yeah.
I didn't recall even asking you that before, so I just
Oh,
wanted
yeah,
to know.
that's
I
fine.
wasn't trying to have you run down your resume. I didn't.
Well, I guess just to frame it in, I mean,
Tell me about your work history, Brian.
Well, the viewing audience was probably asking the same thing, so you filled in that blank there, yeah.
But that's, I mean, and to coming from, like you said, starting at that, being the mechanical engineer and just having this development of where it can go, I think that just shows it doesn't matter exactly where you start, it's that energy of wanting to learn more about something, so.
Yeah, I think, the simple solutions are possible, and sometimes the mindset of a practitioner can be over here, and then people from different fields and experience can maybe see things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And this situation with Barry Sturman having done that work 40 years ago, and even now, John Walker, part of my interview with him was, how often do you get a phone call from a neurologist or an epileptologist? And he kind of laughed and knocked back and scratched his head. He said, well, once every 3-4 years, get a call. And, I think maybe, I was just talking, maybe people would be more inclined to call and see what he's doing and understand this more and make it more available. People learning to work with it. So
It might be another alternative for an individual.
yeah.
Who is
Just
who
to be
has
aware of
uncontrolled
it,
seizures and
yeah.
is taking maybe several medications that they don't
Yeah.
care for the side effects.
Yeah.
So it's something certainly for an individual to look into.
Yeah.
Great information,
So
great
we'll
information.
be happy to come back. We can go into more detail about John Walker's program, and then I know some other great.
Certainly,
neurologists.
we want to make this an ongoing kind of
Make some
series.
installments here.
We're gonna get you silly, you're gonna break out of this.
I'm going to be the straight guy. I've already made up my mind.
I know you
two
made,
have your fun,
I
but-
tried to, I was here trying to be,
And then Tom you've been absorbed, Mario?
yeah, pretty much. It must have to do with,
Quit. That's
being a
not-
risk taker.
That's not true at all. It's not true at all.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Brian.
being with us, Brian.